as a non-Jew that wants to know Torah, you have to know the language, and you have to understand the definitions and nouns and the definitions of those nouns, particularly pertaining to the non-Jew and Torah, to make sure that when you're reading Bnei Noach books, what you're reading is correct, because a lot of what you're coming into is new, and it takes a lot of trust. And through my research, I'm finding that a lot of Bnei Noach books don't get it right. I'm not saying all of it, a lot of it's pretty good, but there's some really critical, fundamental problems that are world-changing problems, and we have to get that right. So if you don't want to listen any more past this, basically, there are different categories of non-Jews. There is not just one type of non-Jew, and many teachers of Bnei Noach are not teaching those different categories. And so I'm going to show you guys in this video, and this audio, that there are different categories that are very crucial, and that when Bnei Noach books quote Jewish law, a lot of times they are only quoting from one category that probably, I shouldn't say probably, that might not apply to you. And there's some critical halachot, critical laws that don't apply to you, that they are trying to apply to you. And it's very wrong. Many of you can detect this, and I'm going to show you kind of why. So we're going to start in, we're getting a little deep actually. This is a book that is commentary on the Talmud. Talmud is the oral law, and it was written down in what's called the Mishnah, and then surrounding the Mishnah is what's called the Gemara, which is a commentary that halakha, that Jewish law is derived from. And this book is called Avoda Berura, service of the commentary, basically. It's kind of like a play on words, I guess, because, at least for this book, so maybe it's not so much play on words, but anyways. Avoda means service. Berura means like notes or commentaries, clarifications, something like that. And then this is a whole set of books. This is just one book, and there's many sets of books pertaining to which tractate of Talmud respectfully it's referring to. And of course there's many books within this set of Talmud. So this is upon al Mesechet Avodah Zarah. This is upon, so this is commentary upon the tractate of Avodah Zarah. As you know, Avodah means worship or service, basically service. And Eved means a servant, and Zara means strange. So upon the tractate of strange worship, which is how you would literally translate that, or strange service. And you would translate that today as idolatry, basically. When you think of idolatry, you think of worshiping stone objects or something like that. It actually just means strange worship. And worshiping man-made objects are just one form of strange worship that you don't want to do. So when we open up here, we're actually in the notes that are from page Samek Dalet 64, and this is shorthand for the Gemara. And we're going to skip a little bit down here, and we're going to focus on the words of a rabbi from the 12th century, something like that. Rabbi Ritva, Rabbi Yom Tov ben Avraham Asvili, and he was he's referred to a lot because he is diuk. He is very accurate in his commentaries and the way he describes things, which, as you know, that's basically what we want, right? So he was also a student of the Rashba, and which is Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, he was a student of the Ramban. So these are guys that were living in France and Spain area, basically. People would write into the Ritva asking for Talmudic answers to their questions. And because he was a student, though, of the Rashba, it's very interesting that people would write into him rather than some of the Talmudic scholars of his day, such as the Rashba, which gives you a insight into the stature of the Ritva. In other words, they had some he had some kind of comparable knowledge to somebody like the Rashba. So anyways, let's go in here. I want to make sure the video's coming in all right. Okay. So Ger Toshav, we're going to be talking about the Ger Toshav. Ger Toshav, so like a resident sojourner. Who is he? Etc. In order to understand, you see my notes here, because my Hebrew is not that good, so I have to take notes. This is how you learn Hebrew, by the way. You take little tiny notes, and what you do is you come across words repeatedly, and just through coming across the same word over and over again, you learn it. It's good to know grammar, but this is secondary as well. In order to understand the issues of the Gemara, we have to precede things with the words of the Ritva. From Masechet Tractate Makkos 9, page 9, Daf Tes 9. Makkos is another tractate. So even though we're talking about, this is from Avodah Zarah here, is actually the authors of this book, of this commentary book, thought it was a good idea to bring in what the Ritva says in Makkos. Makkos is a tractate in the Talmud, again, that deals with corporal punishment, such as flogging, things like that. It was actually part of the book of Sanhedrin, I believe, which is, I haven't read that, unless it's pertinent to Bnei Noach, but it deals a lot with capital punishment, and so this is the corporal punishment, and they kind of tagged along. As a matter of fact, I believe it's right after, in the set, I believe Makkos is right after Sanhedrin. So this is what the Ritva says. There are three speeches, or like three, these literally three ways to say about Goyim. There are three ways to express about Goyim here. And this is interesting. It's not an exact translation, but this is what we're getting at. There are three categories here. This is interesting that he uses actually Goyim here. He says Goyim in the plural. This gives you an idea how the colloquialisms of Goy and Goyim evolved over time. So he's actually, it's funny, he's actually breaking down the categories of Goyim. And he's actually going to talk about one of those categories as Goy. So it's really weird. So today, colloquially, you hear the term Goy and Goyim just talking about all non-Jews. But when you really, really get into the halakha, which is really what matters, and really a more pure speech, which is what we need to get back to, it's just funny. See, this is a good example. If you come across the teacher, especially a teacher that teaches non-Jews, that doesn't understand these categories, run. What I'm about to show you means that you understand some things better than that teacher that is teaching Bnei Noach, and that's really bad. He or she is eventually going to lead you astray and on the wrong path, according to your soul, because he can't recognize who you are, and that's it. That's a big problem. So a lot of rabbis will talk about fulfilling your potential. If they don't know who you are, they don't know your potential. And so you can't let somebody tell you what your potential is. That's something that you have to find out for yourself. Even if somebody believes that their potential is predestined, only the Creator knows that. You're not going to have somebody that doesn't even know you, and you know yourself better than the other person, tell you what your destiny is. That's silly. You try your best, and at the end of the day, that's where you find yourself. Don't let somebody else tell you how to find yourself, where you find yourself. We use the halakha here to describe properties about souls and people, so that you know where you are and what you need to do. Not to stay in that category, such a lowly category as some of these, okay? So here we go. We have 3 categories. We have the ger toshav. That's one type of non-Jew. We have a ben noach. And like I said, a ger toshav means a resident sojourner. A ben noach means children of Noah. Well, ben noach actually means a son or a child of Noah. And then you have a goy. These are the 3 categories. And then he's going to go in and he's going to talk about these 3 categories and describe them. He says a ger toshav. This is he's one that accepts. He's accepted by a Beis Din of Israel. He's accepted by a court of Israel to perform the Sheva mitzvahs that were given to the children of Noah. So that's one type of non-Jew, the ger toshav, the first one. Then he goes on to talk about the second category here, which is a ben noach. And he's one that's not accepted by a Beis Din, but he does do these 7. So he's this ben noach here. He's one that does the 7, but he doesn't go before a Beis Din, or can't, whatever. That's the second category. And then the third category, and this is very interesting, he calls them in a stam. So a stam means plain or simple, like the plain meaning of something. You're talking about just a stam. It's a point where it's just encapsulated and sealed. This is a stam thing. So the stam goy. And when they say stam here, and the reason why they have to throw in stam here, because obviously even during the time of the Ritva, this is confusing, or else he wouldn't be writing this article. And this is, I'm so sorry, I wasn't showing you guys what's going on here. Here we go. And so you have this stam right here, stam goy. The fact that he has to write stam goy, and that's not found, like for instance in the written Torah, means that some wisdom was lost throughout the generations, and this has to be told in a more thorough way. Okay, and this shows you the degeneration of definitions such as the goy, and we have to regenerate and get back to the original terms here. Zephaniah 3:9 talks about Hashem is going to bring back a pure speech. We have to start doing that. We have to start getting back into pure speech, so we know about these different categories that have different laws to them. And we can't throw them all in one big pot and just brush our hands together and say, well, that's it. That's not good. It's gonna lead people astray, and they're gonna hate Torah. Matter of fact, many of you has probably come across this, where you're talking to a teacher of B'nai Noach, or you're doing research on your own, and people are telling you that you can't do this or you can't do that, when you have a feeling that you probably should be able to do that. That doesn't mean that you should, but that definitely means that you need to dig deeper, look inside, and figure out what you should be doing, and figure out if that thing is pertaining to you, that halakha is pertaining to you. And so what does he say about this stam goy, this plain goy? He's one that doesn't, he's not cautious in performing the Sheva mitzvahs. So here you have it. You have these three different categories. You have a goy, he doesn't keep the 7 like he should. You have a ben Noach who does keep the 7 like he should, but he's not accepted by a Beis Din. He's not accepted by Israel, or by a Beis Din, I should say. Which, in other words, there are certain things that are pertinent to a non-Jew, certain things that Israel has a mitzvah to do to a non-Jew that accepts the 7 in front of a Beis Din. They are obligated to do certain things, and then that ben Noach is obligated to do certain things. And that kind of ben Noach is called a ger toshav. So you have 3 categories. That's basically it. You guys just need to know this stuff. You need to know what to look out for when you're talking with teachers that teach B'nai Noach. You need to ask them, are you referring to me as a goy? Are you referring to me as a ben Noach? Are you referring to me as a ger toshav? And when you're referring to me, what halakha are you using? Are you using laws that refer to the goy, the ben Noach, or the ger toshav? A lot of them will reply that the ger toshav it doesn't exist. The ger toshav doesn't exist today. There's no in reality, though. I'm not going to get into it here. We can go to a later video. The ger toshav exists. He exists, but he's just not makablin. He's just not accepted. He's still doing the 7. But because of that, he can't fall under the halakhic ger toshav status in relationship to the Jewish people, and that's why there's this category. I shouldn't say why, but this category is helpful for that reason. This ben Noach here, he is not accepted by the community, but he is still doing his 7. Not only that, but let's say this ben Noach right here, maybe there is a Beis Din, but he doesn't want to go to that Beis Din. That would be a ben Noach stam. That's what the Rebbe talks about. The Lubavitcher Rebbe talks about that in his sichos about B'nai Noach and ger toshav. So you would say there's 2 types of B'nai Noach then. There's one that might want to go to a Beis Din. There's one that doesn't. And the same thing about a ger toshav, maybe. Maybe there's a ger toshav that is actually forced to go a Beis Din because he doesn't want to die or something like that. And he has to accept the 7. Maybe there's a ger toshav that really does want to accept the 7. And anyways, so it goes further and further in depth, but this is the basic cut and dry understanding in one paragraph of the different categories of non-Jews, and why it's not good to be around teachers who refer to you as a goy if you're not a goy, or a ben Noach if you're not a ben Noach, vice versa. You have to figure out where you are in relationship to all these things, what the properties are of these categories, and where you need to go, and preferably up. So thank you all for listening.